Second of a four-part series this spring and summer detailing your MBA admissions journey. So I'm going to talk through the key components of the MBA application process, including what you can be doing right now, including key milestones in the coming months, and how, of course, you can effectively position yourself for target programs. This program is being recorded and the video will be sent to you after this session. So again, thanks for joining me and welcome. Happy Wednesday and hope you're all doing well this evening. So before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Laura Nelson. I have a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University where I studied art, and I'm also a full-time graduate of the MBA program at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, where I was a member of the admissions committee. Before business school, I worked in film and television. So I had a very non-linear path going into business and coming out of school. Following graduation, I worked in my family business for a couple of years before entering the tech industry, where I worked over a decade. And I held roles in general management as well as ascending up the marketing ladder, most recently to VP of marketing of a software startup. My last two organizations exited through acquisition. I've been an MBA admissions consultant for 15 years alongside that, though, starting out with two of the top consulting firms and now with Target Test Prep. I've steered hundreds of MBA clients to top programs, and I'm also a member of AGAC, which gives me direct access to admissions committees at top programs. If you were on last month's webinar, you probably heard me mention that I was headed to a conference with these very admissions directors that I mentioned. So I traveled to Barcelona and Paris, and there were 30 admissions directors from top programs across the US and Europe. I'm excited to talk about some of the trends and things that I heard at the conference in today's webinar. So over the course of those 15 years, I've worked on almost every program imaginable, including full-time, part-time, online executive, and dual degree applications at programs like these on this slide and many others that are not on this list. So now that you've learned a little more about me, I'd love to learn more about you. In the chat, you've already shared where you're dialing in from. Could you talk about what you're doing today and what you want to do post-MBA? It's always great to get a sense of who's in my audience and understand, where you're coming from and, perhaps hopefully I can help you in some way. So I'll give you a moment for that. Again, use the chat feature. Thank you so much for coming. While we wait for answers to trickle in here, great. Got someone going from admin to consulting, which is awesome. Someone in asset management moving into ESG investing or ESG consulting, naval officer moving into consulting, specializing in operations management, awesome. Chemical engineering, working in pulp and paper industry, moving toward corporate finance. A lot of diversity here, which is awesome to see. So this is really representative, of course, of what you'll see in the MBA cohort. So if you were with us last month, this is a little bit of a repeat of where we are with this series. It's a high-level overview of what this four-part webinar series is designed to do. I want to help you map out your progress to complete your applications by round 1 and 2. The milestones that we're going to look at will primarily map to round 1. However, you can adjust these activities as you see fit if you're waiting to apply in round 2. I recommend that you apply to at least a couple programs in round 1 if it's possible and if your application is ready. One more answer here on the careers. Let's see, currently in tech, looking to go into entertainment strategy, content acquisition. That's like almost the complete opposite of what I did, going from entertainment into tech. So that's awesome to hear. As I mentioned in our kickoff last month, the MBA application process, it's long, it's daunting, and it's complex. And the road to that application and to your offer acceptance is anything but straight. This is a really tough process to face alone, and I wouldn't recommend it. It's highly competitive. It requires introspection, reflection, communication, and a high degree of EQ, among other things. So my job for you here is to break down the process into smaller pieces and hopefully make it easier for you to tackle. So today's agenda, here's what we are going to dive into and cover. First, I'm going to cover key milestones in the MBA application journey. In other words, if you're applying to round one, what should you be doing in this month? Next, I'm going to talk about a few of the broad themes that I learned at the MBA Admissions conference a couple weeks ago. What were the trends from last year and how do they affect you and how do you address them? Then I'll discuss some application updates from key programs. As you may have noticed, some programs have started releasing their application essays. We'll talk about which ones have released information and what is new. We'll then tackle a few best practices in the areas of your MBA resume and your career goals. I'll focus on your immediate post-MBA goals here. And then finally, I'm going to leave some time at the end for your questions. So I'll keep an eye on the chat as I go along, but if I can't keep up with it, please feel free to ask your question at the end, and I will leave time to answer as many of those questions as possible. So I really want to start here with the key milestones in the application journey. And, if you were with us last month, these are some of the key activities that you can be doing each month to map to those round one deadlines. If you're interested in joining us on this entire journey or this 4-part webinar series, make sure that you sign up for the rest of the sessions. If you are on this list, you will receive notifications for subsequent sessions. So today we're going to focus on the activities in the yellow box here. No surprise given how I just went through the agenda. There's still plenty you can be doing here, even if your target programs have not released your applications. So today we're going to be focusing on these key milestones. We'll talk about those trends, those best practices, and I really highly encourage you, if you have noticed that some of your target programs have started opening applications, definitely open an account and start poking around and get a feel for what's required of you. And you'll also get on their mailing list. So you'll start to learn about things that are happening in your area and get a sense of how you can further engage with the program and learn more. So let's dive into those application and admissions trends. So the conference was very insightful and gave me a lot of time to interact with admissions directors through panels, group discussions, dinners, and one-on-one conversations. And I'm going to talk about these more in depth, but I thought I would first share the high-level trends. First and foremost, application volume was up last year across most programs. We'll talk about what that means for you and your application, but I'm talking about significant volumes, right? Like 15, 20% or more for some of the top and most competitive MBA programs. Next, I'm going to talk about admissions committees and what they're looking for, specifically from career switchers. Then we're going to talk about what the current market demands of candidates, flexibility and adaptability. And I kept hearing that time and again. We'll talk about what prospective candidates are doing. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with the importance of personal brand and program contributions. So let's dive into that first trend, application volume, right? We see up years and down years with application volume, and previous and recent up years have been driven by an influx of international candidates. However, last year there was growth across the board, across domestic and international candidates. So historically, when we have seen application growth like this, it is generally when the job market is soft. Candidates hide out in business school. They place a bet that the economy and the job market, particularly in the US, will be stronger 2 years after they apply or when they graduate, right? So you've got to think about what does that mean for you as a candidate. Unfortunately, that generally means competition is stronger. You're not a shoe-in for programs that have made sense, a few years ago, numbers-wise. What we noticed is that it particularly affected certain programs like Columbia Business School. So they changed their admissions process from rolling admissions to rounds. They had a spike in applications, and what this meant was they had a lot of qualified and good and typically admissible candidates to Columbia Business School who were either waitlisted or dinged last year. Interestingly, admissions directors also noted that this demand puts pressure on scholarships. Programs are being really judicious on who they award them to, and they want to make sure that those candidates accept, right? They protect this metric called the yield. In other words, it's how many people were offered admission who accepted it. I think the inverse, acceptance divided by offered admissions. So all of that to say there was a lot of complexity last year with the spike in application volume. And I think it's safe to not necessarily assume every year it's just going to go up to the right in a perfect line, but it's safe to assume that the competition is steady and that these programs will increasingly grow competitive year over year. So you've got to think about how does that affect your application strategy? Here's a few things that I would recommend to address this trend in growing demand among the top MBA programs. And the first one is apply early, if possible. I'm not suggesting that you apply early at the expense of your application quality, but by applying early, if you plan ahead, if you follow the steps in this series, right, you get a fresh admissions committee and information that might inform what you do for round two. And what I mean by information for round two, you might not get prescriptive feedback on your application. In most cases, you won't. However, if you don't get into a program that you thought you might be a sure bet in round one, it might change up your strategy for round two. You get a little more time to place applications in the next round. And so that's why I suggest you apply strategically across rounds 1 and 2. Again, if you can get an application ready for round 1, go for it. If your score, for example, is not where it needs to be, you might want to hold off. But this early timing does give you the opportunity to strategize across 2 rounds, because you might have heard already that if a program has 3 rounds, the 3rd round is incredibly competitive. Of course, there are some programs that only have 2 rounds. Talking about HBS in particular, so you really need to aim for round 1 or 2 in that event. You might also consider applying to more programs. What that might force you to do is widen your aperture on which programs you'll consider. It is totally fine, though, if you only want to apply to a certain set of MBA programs, right? Like some people are really hung up on the rankings and, won't spend a lot of time on rankings, but I recommend you use them as a tool, but not an end-all be-all tool. However, if you are dead set on receiving financial aid or you need scholarship money, you need something to offset that MBA, your chances will improve as you move down the list, so to speak. So, remember, these M7 programs, I'm talking about the top 7 programs in the US in particular here, are incredibly competitive, and scholarship money is incredibly tight and competitive at these programs. If that's important to you, choose some programs outside of that aperture. And of course, a last note on moving down the list and widening your aperture is not to spend time applying to programs that don't truly interest you, right? So I'm not saying just toss out an application somewhere that, that's a maybe or just you're not terribly excited about. That's a waste of your time, right? It's a waste of your time, money, and other resources. So really be judicious and think about, which programs might satisfy you should you not get into your first top choices. So I hope that makes sense. But of course, happy to answer your questions on that one. Another big trend that came up in our conversations over the conference was this, need for career switchers, right? Many of the applicants to business schools these days are career switchers. And this trend is really in response to what's been happening in these kind of unpredictable post-COVID years in the job market. Admissions committees and MBA programs in general just want to ensure that you're going to be successful in making that career switch following the MBA program. So if you're a career switcher, which many of you are, you need to think about building how you're going to build confidence among admissions directors and demonstrate how you are going to make this change. You don't have to have all of the pieces of the puzzle, right? So for example, if you're switching careers from the advertising industry to, say, tech marketing, you can imagine there are some transferable skills and experiences. This can come through in your professional work experience, in your extracurriculars, or other things, right? Like, in examples of this evidence might be that maybe in your advertising career, you've worked with tech clients, or maybe you've taken courses on something tech related, like product marketing. Maybe you've joined a local or regional marketing association associated with tech companies. Maybe you've started a community of marketers pursuing tech roles. Maybe you've taken a dozen general meetings with people in the careers that you're pursuing. Whatever the case may be, the more groundwork that you've done, the more evidence that you can share with admissions committees, the more confidence that they will have in your intentional career switch. So they want to feel good about that. They want to say yes, right? Make it easy for them to build that case for switching your career. This trend, number 3, flexibility and adaptability, are more important than ever. This trend really builds on the last one and was probably the most universal piece of feedback I heard from admissions directors recently. MBA admissions committees and career centers are looking for candidates who can adapt to the changing market conditions. So of course, we can't predict what's going to happen in certain sectors or within the US economy at large in the next few years. And you really do have to embrace the fact that there will always be some volatility. We have an election coming up in the US and no one's quite certain what's going to happen with the job market or the economy, regardless of who wins, right? So as a candidate, you have to be prepared for the unexpected. Most applications are going to ask you to articulate a first choice for your career, but be prepared to articulate your second or third choices. So in most cases, your first choice post-MBA career will be the focal point of your application and your conversations. But there are applications like Duke Fuqua's question from last year. They asked very specifically in their short answer about your career, about your alternate plan. So if this doesn't come up in an application, you've got to be prepared to talk about this in an interview. If you're investigating careers, it's helpful to kind of work on parallel paths so that you can be prepared to discuss options, both when the time comes and, of course, when you get to school and you hit the ground running when recruiting season starts. So I hope that makes sense to you. But again, that was a huge theme that admissions directors were talking about. Trend 4 is about how prospects are actively engaging with MBA programs. This isn't new, but the thing that I heard different this year was that engagement has really increased and proactive engagement is becoming the norm. So yes, networking matters with admissions directors and with programs. So here's a few tips for how you can engage with admissions committee members, current students, alums, and more. I highly recommend that you be memorable, but I think there's a fine line of, memorable, but not annoying. This is not to say that you need to be like over the top, but if you have a specific interest and ideas on how you'll contribute to the program, feel free to share them in a conversation when appropriate. Next, I recommend that you be thoughtful in your interactions. Consider your audience. In other words, a student will have different concerns as an alum, who will have different concerns as an admissions director. So tailor your questions accordingly. And then finally, leverage what you learn in these interactions in your application materials as appropriate. So you are going to get great insight that is going to come up later in the process. And you all may be wondering, okay, well, how do I engage with these programs? I talked about this a little last month, but if you weren't with me, or even if you're still waiting through the process, I think it might be helpful to talk about all of the opportunities that you have to engage with the program. And my recommendation here really is to start broad, like that top of the triangle. Start attending general events like virtual admissions events, MBA fairs, etc. You don't have to attend 10 for a program, 1 or 2 is just fine. Because like once you've learned a little more and have targeted questions to ask about your career goals, about how the program can facilitate them, then you have enough ammo to go into a coffee chat and get some more targeted information from the participants, right? That might be, a small group setting or a one-on-one setting with admissions. I put conferences on here. Those are like kind of affinity weekends for different, groups of students who come onto campus. Like those are obviously a great opportunity to interact as well. Because like by the time that you're reaching out one-on-one to admissions ambassadors, club officers, and alums, and your desired career paths, or who have pursued common interests, you already have an understanding of what you're really trying to learn out of the program, and can get really highly specific answers. I put on-site visits or campus visits last year. This is a really high intent interaction that costs time and money. So obviously, if you are located in close proximity to your programs of choice, like for example, if you're in New York and applying to NYU and CBS, I probably wouldn't put this in the same place. But if you're getting on a plane, if you're traveling to visit a program, I would recommend doing some of this other homework before you get to that step. Definitely you don't have time to, visit 8 or 10 programs, unless your resources are infinite. But, if you are able to visit a program, make sure you are targeting their programs of highest interest. I talked about this a little last month, but I think it's also kind of worth sharing here, because I get this question a lot, which is like, how do you recommend that I interact directly with students? As I mentioned before, look for student ambassadors at your target programs, and you can really filter them by, your interests, your career goals, so that you can have a, more specific and productive conversations. Professional and other club officers are a great way to find people. You can generally, find them through the club websites. And here's what you do. Find them, find their email address, send them an email, and just ask for 15 minutes of their time. This is a really easy commitment, and many students are going to lend more time. And I recommend teeing up some questions, asking them about their specific experiences with the program. People love talking about themselves. You're going to learn a lot that way. And then finally, ask pointed questions to elicit information that you wouldn't find elsewhere. So you can ask them about courses they loved. You can workshop your career interests, goals, and how that program will facilitate them directly. You can ask them about, what it's like to live on that particular campus or in that particular town or city. And, if they're in a similar career path to you, I would ask them about their recruiting experience and what they'd recommend for someone in your position. So I hope that's helpful. That might be a review for some of you guys, but I know this is a big part of getting acclimated with the program and learning more, because this is a big investment of time and money. The fifth trend I want to highlight here that was, the outcome of many of our conversations at this admissions conference is about your personal brand and contributions. So admissions committees, they want to understand your personal brand. This came up time and again. And I want to qualify this by saying, this is not to say that you're known for one thing, right? It is about knowing your strengths and showing a self-awareness of them. So these can be exhibited strategically throughout your MBA application materials. Understand how your brand and strengths will also contribute to this program. First, of course, that requires you to understand the program and what they value and what that value proposition of an MBA is. But of course, then you can layer in your strengths to discuss how you'll make an impact during business school. And as we get to some of the questions, you'll see that some programs are asking about that directly this year. So questions on any of the trends, feel free to pop them into the chat, or of course, we'll tackle them in the Q&A. I want to get to some really current information. This would be the application updates from some of the top programs. New information is here. It's been great to see some of these application updates trickle out this week. I will acknowledge, though, that some programs are really late in getting their applications open this year when we compare this to past years. And I think it's really putting the pressure on round one. But if you kind of look at the overview of the things that you could be doing, there's a lot that you can do to tee up your readiness for completing the application. So I'm going to go through a few of the top programs that have either released information or made changes, starting with Columbia Business School. If you are applying for the J-term for Columbia Business School, that first due date is mid-June. It's soon. But again, apply when your application is ready. And I am told that you don't need to wait till that mid-August deadline for your application to go into review in the event that you miss the June deadline. The program has also released its essays here, and they are nearly the same as last year, but there is a slight update in the language of essay 3. So the program is asking how you'll co-create your experience at CBS. And this really ties back to one of the trends that I discussed. One of the things that the admissions committee really wants to see is, how is your personal brand going to contribute, right? What are you going to do? What are you going to uniquely add to the cohort? You've got to be ready to discuss that at CBS or any of these other top MBA programs. Next, we have Yale. They released their application dates and their essay questions as well. What I like about the Yale essay is that you just have to write one of them. You have 3 to choose from, which kind of enables you to kind of choose your own adventure across 3 topics. So they ask, what is the biggest commitment you've ever made? They've had this question around for a long time. They also ask the community that has been most meaningful to you. Or the third question you can answer is the most significant challenge that you have faced and how you confronted that and how it has shaped you as a person. So I like the choose your own adventure aspect of the Yale application. If you are applying to Harvard, you might have seen these updates already. So the application dates have been released, and the first deadline, I think, is September 4th. But also, this is huge for HBS. They're about a month late in releasing this, by the way, but because they have a new dean of admissions, this is a notoriously difficult essay and application, and they are making some changes. So look for updates later this month. Let's see, it's the 12th. So you've got 13 days to wait and see what they are going to put out for us. Next, Kellogg. They announced this yesterday during the GMAT Club event that they've updated, and they've now updated their website with their essay prompts. And these are new essays as well. So essay 1 is all about intentionality. Specifically, why are you pursuing an MBA? What are your goals? Why is now the right time? And why is Kellogg the right place? And also, what will you contribute? You have to talk about all of this in 450 words. And mark my words, this is going to be one of the more difficult essays that I work on this year with clients, because there is just so much to talk about in so little space. I think the second essay, though, is a little more manageable. So the program wants to know about a specific professional experience when you made a difficult decision, and to identify the values that fed into the decision and how it impacted your leadership style. So take note, they're looking for one professional story, which you need to be able to tell succinctly, and then discuss the various inputs and outcomes as well. And the last program update I have for you is that my alma mater, Ross, released their application deadlines and a whole new set of essay questions. So this previously was one of the shortest applications to complete, and now the word count has doubled. But each of these really prompt you to understand the specific culture and community of Ross and propose how you will contribute and benefit from the program. So there's 700 words here overall. They have a little bit of a choose your own adventure in part 2. And I'm really excited for these updates because, they're really asking you to relay your understanding of the program and excitement for it. So I'm aware there's some other updates out there, but these are the ones that I wanted to highlight that had some, specific nuance and specific changes from what we've seen in the past. So I'm happy to take questions about programs in the Q&A. Obviously, use the chat whenever you like. Right now, I'm going to move into the last section, though, and talk about best practices for resumes and how to articulate your career goals. Because even if you're waiting for, say, HBS or some other target program, these are things that you can be working on right now. This is what I am in the thick of with my clients right now. First, let's talk about the resume, because this is going to be a little different than your job search resume. First, the MBA resume provides a really clear picture of your professional achievements to date. If this is done well, you do not have to repeat this information elsewhere in your application. Second, you've got to highlight these achievements rather than discuss these day-to-day duties. So a lot of resumes I see talk about day-to-day things, tasks, responsibilities, etc. There is another spot to do that, to include that information in what we call the data form or other area of the application. So the equivalent I'm going to make is, you've probably applied to a job before and uploaded your resume and then had to fill out a bunch of forms, and maybe you copy and pasted your resume. You are not going to do that in your MBA application, okay? You're going to take your achievements, you're going to be very succinct about them. We're going to fit a page, and you'll take all those day-to-day responsibilities and use them in the application form. That way, the admissions committee, they don't have redundant information on your application, and they get a holistic picture of what your job entails. So third, speaking of admissions directors, you need to consider the audience for these resumes, right? These readers might not know all of the ins and outs of your industry, so we're going to talk about what that means for you on the next slide. Fourth, it's important to detail your undergrad experience, particularly achievements, leadership experiences, extracurriculars. Top programs want to see evidence that you're going to contribute to the cohort, and emphasize this here in your resume. So it might not be in your current version, but this is something they really do want to see. And then finally, leadership is a really important and common theme throughout your MBA application. So you can definitely demonstrate through your resume, where you've shown leadership at work and what that impact has been. So again, this is just kind of like the holistic goals of what this document is meant to provide. And on this next page, I'm talking about how you can put this all together. So just a quick tip. Format your resume as follows. You're going to start with your professional experience, followed by your education, followed by your extracurriculars. There might have some nuance with your sections, but these are the 3 broad general sections. Next, you're going to ensure that each of your bullet points uses what we call the ACR format. So that's action, context, and result. I provided an example here that starts with an action, created go-to-market plans, Context is, who are they for? Well, they're for partner and association co-marketing programs. And the result ties it all together with a revenue number. So this is an actual bullet point from one of my jobs a few years ago. You have to use metrics to quantify your impact wherever possible. So this is not going to happen in all of your bullet points, and that's totally okay. But where you can show growth, dollars wise, percentage wise, add that detail. Some things will be in progress, that's okay. Some things will have an intended outcome where you're not aware of what the outcome is, and you'll have to finesse the language there. And also, some things will have, there'll be kind of like team-oriented contributions that will have an impact that's not measurable, and that's totally fine. I mentioned on the last slide that you've got to consider your audience, and this is where you really need to ensure your reader can understand what you did and why it matters. So if you have a lot of technical or industry jargon on your resume, you're going to need to translate that to layman's terms. I'm not saying you've got to dumb this down by any stretch, but just make it understandable for your audience. And then finally, you've got to read the application instructions, because many of the top programs want a one-page format. So I know for many of you, this is like really tough to do, and it requires you to be like really succinct and judicious with your words. It will take several drafts to do it, but it can get done. So I know that was a quick and dirty primer on resumes, but again, hopefully all of this is like really actionable stuff that you can be working on today. I'm going to shift gears to career goals while focusing on that immediate post-MBA goal. So this is crucial to understand and communicate to admissions directors who want you to be a successful candidate, who want you to be placed in the job that you want upon graduation. So I like this illustration because the MBA is that activity in the middle that really is the bridge to your future. This is the journey that you are going on from one point to the other, one point being on the left side, leveraging that help and support that you get from others, those tools, right, to get to what is hopefully a higher place in your life and in your career. This is right where you want to be. And part of your challenge with the MBA application is describing how that program fills that gap in the middle, how it provides knowledge and experience to help you get to the other side. So here's a few guidelines on how to do that. I'm going to get really tactical in how to talk about your career goals. And this is a simple but not easy exercise. So first, pick a function, industry, and target companies. This is a simple way to state, where do you want to be post-graduation? And this simple sentence becomes part of your elevator pitch. Next, you're going to identify an alternate career path. So we talked about flexibility and adaptability earlier, and this is really critical to keep in your back pocket, right? Some applications are explicitly going to ask for it, some won't, but it will come up in an interview or somewhere else. So it's always good to have something to discuss there. And then finally, you're going to map your skills and experiences to your target jobs. So use job listings as a resource and ask yourself, right, which of the skills and experiences do you have? Which of them do you need? How will the MBA fulfill what you need to land that role? And then map those needs to specific programs. So which courses, which programs, which extracurriculars and more are going to help you land and succeed in that desired role. It's a simple format, but like this takes time to map out, for each of your desired career paths or desired programs, right? But this is going to save you a lot of work down the line because each program has their way of asking these questions, and you'll have to articulate it either in short answers, in essays, or in interviews as part of this application process. So I hope that was clear. I know, again, quick and dirty on the career goals, but hopefully food for thought in how you can start to articulate these things. So I'm going to transition over to Q&A, but before I do that, I just want to make sure that you have full knowledge of the target test prep products and services. If you didn't know already, you can try us for 5 days for free. This is not only across the GMAT, but it's also available for the GRE and the executive assessment tests. So if you haven't started your test prep, if you need a trusted partner, check out this free trial. Next, if you want to talk about your candidacy, definitely avail yourself of a free consultation so that we can talk one-on-one about your MBA application strategy. My consultations generally run longer than 15 minutes, and my goal is to provide you with some insight on how you can put your best foot forward in this process. Diving a little deeper, if you're interested in working together on your application process from the holistic start to all the way through to the tactical materials that you'll need to put together to submit, we can do so in 2 modes. You've got the comprehensive packages, which include all of the activities you see on the left here. It's really a soup to nuts offering so that no stone is unturned in your process. However, we also have a la carte options. Here's a sampling of those available to you if you have targeted needs across your resume, essay, interview, and more. We do have kind of like a hidden third option. If you want to get started and hourly is best for you, you can always roll that into a package later. Okay, finally. Again, here's that QR code if you want to set up a time to chat, but definitely use the chat feature to ask questions. I'm going to get to as many as possible. Here's a link to the consultation as well. And we also have a promo code if you are interested in signing up for comprehensive services. I do see a couple of questions coming into the chat, so I'm just going to leave this up here. And there's a good question here about networking. Is there a difference between networking with admissions and students? So am I recommending that we reach out to admissions directly, or do students review applications? So yes, there is a difference between engaging admissions and engaging students. Students are going to give you the soup to nuts, or like the full understanding of what it's like to be in classes, what recruiting's like, what your career path is like, what the ins and outs of being a student are today. Many of the admissions directors, like many of them are not from the program, or they're like a few years removed from the MBA, if they were. So for example, I'm 16 years out of an MBA program. I'm not a good resource for what it's like to be a current student at the Ross School of Business. So I am not a good resource for that. And that's why I definitely recommend that you reach out to, admissions ambassadors, club officers, to get a true understanding of what that's like and understand if it's a fit for you. Students do actually review applications, and that's what I did in my second year on the admissions committee. They read applications and they also help conduct the interviews. So they do have influence in that part of the process. I don't think I answered your question earlier. You asked if you should reach out to admissions directly. I would definitely engage with them on like virtual sessions, coffee chats, work with admissions on their pre-scheduled programming. Unless they offer one-on-one time, whatever, generally, it doesn't scale for them. So it doesn't make sense to meet individually with people unless it's already part of, a coffee chat or an MBA fair or something like that. Another question, how important is work experience in having a background in business? Will having only 1 year of work experience put a candidate at a disadvantage? I would recommend, well, the first part, you don't need a business degree. Definitely read the class profiles of your target programs. So to find them, search class profile, MBA, Wharton, for example. And you're going to see where people are coming from, not only in terms of their undergrad degree, but also in terms of like their pre-MBA industry. You'll see people they do have business degrees, econ, whatever. They might come from finance, banking, whatever, but there are a slew of students coming from humanities, tech, and other kind of like non-business careers. So you won't be alone if that's the case for you. Will only having 1 year work experience be a disadvantage? You know, if you look at the class profiles, you will also see that a range or an average for numbers of years of work experience. So the MBA is a professional degree, and many of these programs average around 5 to 6 years of work experience. They're looking for people to bring their experiences back to the classroom and have practical things to talk about in terms of like what they've seen in the workforce. That said, there are outliers, right? Like there will be people with 1, 2, or 3 years of experience. There will be people with 10 or more years of experience because we're only looking at averages. Some programs publish a range, but a school like HBS, the most recent class, 4.9 years, right? So that doesn't tell us a whole lot of, how many people are coming in with 1 year of experience. That said, these programs might be pushing you more into a Master of Management or Master of Finance or Master of Marketing, whatever your area of interest is. If you're kind of outside what their kind of typical profile looks like, you might explore some of those kind of specialty masters programs instead. So I hesitate to say it's like a disadvantage, but it is a little bit of an outlier, and I'd have to dig a little deeper into your particular scenario to have a stronger opinion on that. But good question. Anything else? Kind of a quiet group tonight, but that is totally okay. So Erin, so there's a question about GMAT and GPA. Does a 765 GMAT and 4.0 GPA provide likely admission to an MBA program, even if I struggle with essays? And no, it does not. When I was at Michigan, I worked on a subcommittee that evaluated applications from India, and there were plenty of 750 GMATs, and we're talking about like the old scoring system, not the focus, that were dinged because they did not address any of their application materials to Ross specifically. So, great test score, great GPA. It won't keep you out, but you're trying to get that admissions committee to a yes, and you need a strong story to do that as well. Because unfortunately, like if you look at the competitiveness of programs like an HBS, like a Stanford, they're turning down people with perfect GPAs and incredible test scores every day because there, unfortunately are so many well-qualified candidates. So, especially if you're looking at an M7 program, your stories need to be on point as well. Question about the GMAT focus. How have schools stated how the shift to GMAT focus, specifically how the overall score now includes data insight? This is a great question, and one I don't have a straight answer for you on, unfortunately. We talked about this at the conference a bit, and unfortunately, because the test rolled out like with kind of weird timing in the middle of the admission season. A lot of these programs are, working with candidates with, on the old scoring system, and that's still the majority, and kind of taking a wait and see approach with the focus. A couple of them I talked to are looking at the percentiles to kind of calibrate, right, how a student is doing, but they weren't ready to be like prescriptive on like, hey, we're looking at 695 and above or whatever, like, because they just don't know yet. You got to remember, like, higher ed is a little more conservative and slower to react than some other industries. So they're taking in the information, but I wouldn't say they have a super nuanced way of parsing through it yet. I would be curious though, if you got a more direct answer from admissions in a session, so definitely report back if you hear that's the case. But unfortunately, they weren't super prescriptive with my group a couple weeks ago. Question about, what is the delta for students from overrepresented communities with test scores? Booth had a 325 average GRE. So, this person, this is really hard to answer, right? Like, because these programs, they'll publish an average score, say quant and verbal, and you can add that up, right? And, get a pretty healthy score into the 300s for the GRE. But, overrepresented communities like students coming from India are competing with themselves, unfortunately, right? So, you'd have to have like pretty extraordinary marks and, also a solid story. I have seen candidates who have had kind of lower than the norm test score for a particular group, but a really differentiated candidacy kind of help them stand out and gain admission. So we do see those cases, but, I wouldn't say there's like a hard and fast rule that these schools are adopting. Another question about my MBA experience at Ross. How has the program prepared me and helped me with career advancement? Great question. I'm happy to share that. So prior to business school, I was working in entertainment industry. If you're not familiar with the industry, like most people start out as assistants to executives, and they're handling like all their grunt work. Like you've got to answer the phone, do all their scheduling, do some of their personal stuff. If you've seen the show Entourage, you've maybe gotten a taste of that and how assistants work. I also worked at a film studio, like in my first job. So I was also providing film script coverage, like reading and making recommendations on scripts. Following that, I worked for a talent manager and was like helping him actually handle talent, right? Figuring out like, the logistics of, an actor or actress's career and, helping, that is a whole broad range of activities. So the reason I went to business school was, I was really interested in staying in the industry and transitioning to a business type role. So like in marketing or in some other function in a studio. And what happened is, once I got to school, I was exposed to a whole broad range of possibilities, and this happens a lot. So your story for your career has to make sense, but you are not going to be held to it at graduation. So I talked about wanting to go into marketing and wanting to go into consumer goods. And I got to school and realized that I was not interested in the particulars of a consumer packaged goods marketing career. And I would say my experience during the program was atypical. My dad got sick. I took over his role in the family publishing business. I was doing that in my second year. While finishing business school, he died. I missed a month of school. I graduated. And after school, I continued in the publishing business till, my family was in a good spot and I felt more confident in moving on. So all of that to say, like, my initial plan was to go back in entertainment, but I ended up moving to the San Francisco Bay Area instead and going into tech. And that has tremendously helped me, like just getting a foot in the door in tech. And the first hiring manager, by the way, was a Ross grad. So I would never have gotten that job without that connection. And, that really put me on the path to, all types of roles. Like I started in general management. I reported up to a CFO after a couple years in that role. And what I've found most valuable is having access to that community and having that credibility in my background has really made a difference. Because I've been a part of both the Bay Area clubs. There's a very healthy population of Ross grads in the Bay Area. So, the networking and job opportunities are tremendous when you're there. We have a smaller cohort. I mentioned earlier, I'm in the Denver metro now, and we have a smaller but growing cohort of rosters here. And I would say like, the experience is different, but like the connections are very strong here as well. And, it's been great from a, networking perspective, but also like, open my possibilities. In tech, I've been able to work my way up in the marketing function and, assess problems through a much different lens than I would have been able to do without that, strategic framework and also, that credibility of the degree. You will find that, I think the most valuable thing, obviously you're going to get a great education in the 2 years, but gaining access to a network and, becoming part of this, broader community is where the real value is in an MBA. So I know that was a really long-winded answer and maybe an incomplete answer, but it's been tremendously valuable to opening doors that frankly, like would not have existed had I not undergone this experience. So another question about test scores. You see individual scores percentile emerging as more important overall right now. This person says they haven't been able to get an answer from AdCom either. No one's willing to commit to an answer. So, okay, that's consistent with what I've heard. And programs have always looked at percentiles across, say, verbal and quant, for example. So now they have like a third to look at with the GMAT focus, but they have always looked at percentile to understand, how that year's cohort is scoring in a particular exam. That's not particularly new, but that was feedback that I got from what AdCom when we were talking about the GMAT focus was like, they were just looking at that calibration table that GMAT has published, but consistent to what you're saying, hasn't committed to something hard and fast. So I'll be really interested to see what comes of those class profiles once they publish them. I think that's it for the questions. So thank you so much. I hope this was valuable. I know I kind of rambled on in the questions, but really appreciate your interaction, your attention, and hope this is valuable. I'll leave this screen up for a minute. And again, thanks a ton. Have a great rest of your night and week, and see you next month for the July session. Take care.